Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back here to Super Sunday here on Apex Racing TV, and welcome to part 2 of the Weekend Warriors, the Spec Racer Fords. My name is Ron Mons. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Charles Bichelle, and in the virtual production hall we have our old friend Samuli Kumo. Now, folks, I'll be honest with you, I had an entire intro right now talking about how we had just seen this combination before, probably at this point about 10 days ago, with the Ray Esports Racing League here on Tuesday nights here on Apex Racing TV, and had the Spec Racer Fords put on a pretty good show there, but I had to throw that entirely out of the window. As you can see, with that sad looking chicken nugget of a track layout that we have here, we are running at VIR, but on the North layout, which is a track that me and Charles have basically no experience at. I was joking about how I'd probably only driven this combination on Forza Motorsport 7 back when I was probably about 14, and Charles, you have very limited experience here as well, but still VIR. Slipstreaming is still going to be the name of the game with that long start-finish straightaway. However, with that angry-looking tapeworm of a middle sector here on this track, I think we may see some more mistakes than we usually see at VIR. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. So obviously the change that we're making here, instead of doing the full VIR layout, we're doing what's called the North Course. So basically it's turn 1, the hairpin, going through turns 2, 3, and 4, coming out of the snake. You'll make a nice hard right hand turn and head uphill through the middle of the course, and that takes you back over to the end of the back straight right at the beginning of roller coaster. So we lose that nice long drafting back straight where we would normally see lots of passing. So that makes it a much more quicker lap, much more technical layout. So it'll be interesting to see how the drivers cope. I have seen a few little issues with that uphill corner, as it's called on the track map, where there is a nice concrete patch on the outside, kind of a track extender or a track joint, where the switch over from asphalt to concrete is catching a few drivers out. They're having a little struggle a little bit. But still going to make for some pretty interesting racing, and we'll see how it all plays out.
This is going to be a very strange race, and it's off the back of a strange race that we saw earlier on this afternoon with the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors. Anyone that tuned into that broadcast noted the 10 alien abductions we had, with drivers getting sucked up into a UFO, having connection issues all over the place. Fingers crossed we don't have that here in this Spec Racer Ford race. We're in this qualifying session now, about 7 minutes left to go here, and I think while we're still in the middle section here of this qualifying, as we see Joao Tabino going through that uphill section, I think we may touch on the points, because we are a few rounds, this being the 5th round of the season. We have a pretty good picture as to what the championship results may look like and what the drivers are that we need to keep our eyes on when it comes to these championship fights. And at the front of S1, it's Joao Tabino there, 345 points on the board, with Evandro Dantas there in second, 318. That's a pretty decent gap between himself and Jason Green there. Not a whole lot of room for error, no wiggle room towards the front of all of these classes, S1 being no different. We'll move on to S2. As you can see, a nice little parking lot there on the inside of, I believe that's Hogpen, one of the final corners here on this track, and it's incredibly close in this class as well. Philip Airy at the front there, 196 points on the board. Paul Jackson there in second at 187. That's a bit of a gap between themselves and Russell Teckler, but those two at the front being separated by only 9 points. That is going to create a tantalizingly exciting fight at the front of S2. And then we'll move on to Masters here, which is another pretty close fight. It's currently Tom Gradwell at the front there, only 6 points ahead of Brad Cathcart there in P2. The Australians locking out the front 2 positions in that class, with Kurt Nunez in P3 a little bit farther back. So again, like we see in the other classes, the front 2 breaking away. We saw this in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors, looking at the championship results there, how we're just seeing some drivers rise above the rest when it comes to who's going to be the one to keep our eyes on when it comes to these championship fights. And again, these are incredibly close. Charles, I'll ask you this again because I asked it before on the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors broadcast earlier today. Which is the class fight that you're going to keep your eyes on this season?
And once again, I'll give you the same answer I gave you before. I always kind of, I watch all the classes, but I always kind of, because it's the Masters class is near and dear to my heart, as I'm almost at that stage of my life. And just looking at those lists, there's some very, very fast drivers that's had some bad luck at the start of the season. So once again, we can't count those guys out that may be down in the bottom part of the top 10. Because it just takes a guy like maybe Marco Pinero to go on a run of 4 wins, and the next thing you know, he's up at the top of the points again. So hats off to the guys that have had some really good driving and maybe a little bit of luck involved as well at the start of the season. And let's hope they can continue on, and maybe we'll have our first spate of first-time winners here in the league.
I think this race is going to be the one where we may see some weird results. This is a weird track. It comes off the back of another weird track that we saw last time at, that being the New Hampshire road course. That was I think the first broadcast I ever called at that track. Charles, I know you had some experience with that combination last season here at the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. However, that was still a very strange run to that old scan. This is a new scan though, but it's running on a very strange track layout. However, it still has those VIR characteristics. We're sliding around the corners there. You can see Jurcevics there in the number 422 car heading through NASCAR bend of turn number 3. This track is still just as challenging, just as tricky, and just as rewarding if you get it right, but there's still plenty of opportunities to really mess up your race if you make even a tiny bit of a mistake. The runoff area here at VIR, ever unforgiving, even though it's pretty much just grass. And of course, with the reworked off-road physics here in iRacing that were implemented a few seasons ago, the grass isn't as much of a skating rink as we saw in the past. However, this is still going to be a very challenging circuit. This is a challenging section here going through, I think I called it earlier, being a upset tapeworm section. I think that's really the only way I can describe it. Not a whole lot of places to overtake there. I think going through that middle section, it's just a game of survival.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. Until they get a handle on it, because it is, a new layout for us that a lot of drivers may not be used to. Till they get a handle on the pace and the lines they need to take, could see some interesting incidents that occur there.
I feel like we can't actually set up a drinking game to note every single time we set the interesting, but that's the only way we can really describe this and what kind of racing we may see here today. Another thing we need to point out as well, we pointed this out on the Formula Fords earlier on this afternoon, is the jumbled up grid. Currently, it's a little bit less dramatic. Currently, the top 10 are comprised entirely of S1 drivers. However, one big thing that we were talking about with our producer Josh on the Formula Ford broadcast, because he is in this race as well, currently P23 in this qualifying session with about 2 minutes left on the board, is just finding a space on the track where you aren't being affected by a car right in front of you. VIR usually, I think that track is about I think it's about like 3.8 miles, if not in the 4 range. It's a very big racetrack, and in the Spec Racer Fords, it's a pretty big lap time as well. This track, meanwhile, is 2.25 miles. The lap times are only about a minute and a half. So I think just trying to find just a tiny bit of breathing room to set a fast lap time here in this qualifying session with 44 Spec Racer Ford race cars out there on the racetrack, that is incredibly important. And Charles, do you think we've really seen this issue be amplified in the past, or do you think there's a new problem here with this series?
Yeah, it's probably a new problem, but I think that it's, you know, the standard format still applies. As you want to be able to get a good draft off a car in front down the front straight. Obviously, as we said, you don't have the back straight to get a, you know, where you could gain a half-second plus on your lap time. So you need to get everything there and then just have a good clean lap the rest of the way through. As you see a car off on the right there, it looks like he had the same issue as you saw where that little concrete triangle is. It's just like I said, it just seems like it's catching people out because it's unfamiliar territory for most of these drivers. But, you know, obviously roller coaster hog pins, pretty straightforward. We know this. And you're not really carrying as much speed on roller coaster on entry. So that's probably a little bit of a help to the drivers. So, yeah, it's, you know, there's obviously new opportunities with a new track layout. And it looks like some of our drivers are making the most of it.
So we are in crunch time here in this qualifying session. As you can see, Sergio there pulling into the pits, and you can see the parking lot that we have on the inside of turn number 17. It's Grant Kramer waiting out. He was a driver that took the checkered flag, the top of all the drivers in the Formula Ford race earlier on today. Jason Perry there parked alongside Jorg Mani, who at this point, I think he's looking for some sort of break, some sort of bit of good luck to fall his way, because he got struck by a falling anvil in that Formula Ford race earlier on this afternoon. So I think he's going to try and look to find any sort of way to claw up through the field. I will say, not a good qualifying for him. He's currently 38th with the checkered flag now out in this qualifying session, so that's likely where he will remain. That is not a good result for the master driver to be all the way down pretty much at the back end of the field.
Yeah, our reigning champion, Jorg Mani, if it wasn't for bad luck, he wouldn't have any luck at all this season. I think I saw him where he was 15th in the points in the Masters class, which is just, you know, obviously he's a perennial front runner. You know, if you weren't watching the Formula Ford race, was leading that race before the iRacing gods smote him from the server. So now it's just having a little bit of fun. You know, nice little cheering section they had built up there, watching everybody qualifying down by Hogpen. And so I think they're pretty much done. They're ready to start. Ready to stop qualifying, ready to start racing.
I'm pretty sure most of the field is done with qualifying. You can see Carvalho there that just towed back to the pits, pulled off into the other runoff area of turn number 1. We're just waiting for a few more cars who are still out there on the circuit. We got Gardini there. Ooh, yeah, you can see some bumpers flying here. Hopefully these drivers don't wreck their equipment like they're doing here in this qualifying session. Who gets a nice little love tap there from Trent Kramer. And ooh, you can see a nice slide there from Bob Kern. Did a little bit of rally action as he came out of Hogpen and onto that start. Finished not so straight away, where slipstreaming is absolutely going to be the name of the game. Turn number 1 is going to be a fantastic overtaking opportunity that we're going to see used quite a lot here in this race. We'll just have to wait and see how things shake out. Lou Holly, one of the last cars still out on track here in this qualifying session in the 717 car here, running out of New Jersey, and hopefully didn't get shaken up too much by that earthquake we had a couple of weeks ago. I felt that. I was actually in the bathroom at the time and felt that earthquake. earthquake and ran out of my house as quickly as I could, being in a house built in the 50s at a very poorly put together concrete. I was terrified that my house was collapsing, but no, it was just an earthquake. And speaking of earthquake, I think the entire field is going to be shaken at the race that we have in store here, and it's Joao Tabino that's going to be leading them to green. Marco Panera there joining him on the front row. Then it's Pelva there in P number 3. Jason Green in 4th. Christian Kabanka, who we haven't seen, I think, since round number 2. He was also a part of that very dramatic finish at the very season opener at Summit Point. He'll be starting this race in 5th. Dudu Castro in a somewhat disappointing 6th. We'll see what the Brazilian driving for Tony Kanaan can do from his row 3 starting spot. That's Bobby West in 7th. Trent Kramer in 7th. That's Claudio Gradini there in P number 9. Trent Kramer was in 8th. I apologize for that. That's Carvalho there, the top of the S2 drivers. He is in 10th. Evandro Dantas in 11th. Jeff Jacobson in P number 12. Then going through the rest of the field, we have Wilson in 13th. Jurcevics there in P number 14. Ben Jacobs in 15th. Yanchi Lin in 16th. Jim Brewster, the top of the Masters drivers in that qualifying session. He'll be starting this race in P17. Alan McCain in 18th. Scott Russell in 19th. And Tom Gradwell running at your top 20.
Starting in the P21, Josh Justice, Kurt Nunez in 22nd. Our buddy Josh Wilkie in 23rd. Hugh Simpkins in 24th. Lou Holly in 25th. Brendan Cathcart in 26th. Brad Cathcart in 27th. Andrew Love in 28th. Philip Berry 29th. Jesus Rodriguez in 30th. Paul Jackson P31. Adam Bradshaw P32. 33rd is Russ Telker. 34th, Bob Kern. Michelle Viglini in 35th. Wayne Buttermore in 36th. Ian Wilson in 37th. Jorg Monty in 38th. Carl Burke 39th. Jason Perry in 40th. And then rounding out the rest of the grid, Marcus Burkett in 41st. Sergio Dorelli starting in the back in 42nd. Maurizio Naselli starting in the back in 43rd. Gianni Longan, Manning Grennan, Chris Montgomery, and Jason Grider all did not set times. So they will be looking to work their way up. So it'll be something we'll have to watch because both Naselli and Dorelli are quite quick in these cars. And so we saw what Naselli did last week with his rise through the ranks during the race at New Hampshire. And he'll be looking to do the same thing again today.
Yeah, Naselli was the best storyline for that race at New Hampshire just 1 week ago. Cut through the field. I think he overtook, I'm trying to remember what the statistic was. I think
we came up with around 40
cars.
Yeah, 44 cars or something like that during the course of the
44,
race.
Yeah. I undersold him a bit there. 44 cars, 44 overtakes that he put on there. Cut through the field twice, had very early pit stop. Actually pit around the 12-minute barrier, which we've seen in the past, is usually when the pit window opens here at this track, where traffic may be the name of the game. I think we may see some split strategies here, some drivers trying something else, and of course getting through lap 1 and getting through this entire race clean is going to be vital for some of these drivers. One driver that I hope can get through clean is going to be Josh Justice. We were talking about this before the start of the broadcast. The last time the Spec Racer Fords were at VIR for a broadcast here on Apex Racing TV. Justice ended up on his lid. You can actually, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that made it into the Apex highlights reel for the month of March, so you can check out that video after this broadcast is done. That's been up for the past few days. And I also had a funny little moment where I was doing a broadcast on my own about a month ago, and my dad walked in giving me a glass of water and a towel for the water that I'd spilled on my desk probably about a minute beforehand. But Josh Justice hoping to cut through the field and actually not end up on his lid like he did just a few weeks ago with the Ray Esports Racing League on Tuesdays. You can check out those streams. Those are the sister series here for these Weekend Warriors broadcasts. Charles and I are a part of those as well, and we absolutely love the racing there because it's always action-packed, and the same could be said about this series as well. You can see Joao Tabino actually pulling a little bit ahead, maybe a little bit of mind games going on between your front row sitters. One's a Brazilian, the other is from Italy, so we'll see what sort of mind games may play with these two drivers. Will we go early? Will Joao Tabino hold back? We'll just have to wait and see. That Porsche pace car has made that slight right-hand turn to go down pit road. The field is now in the hand of your pole sitter, Joao Tabino, in the number 50 car. We're just waiting. It feels like forever if you're one of these drivers. You can see Josh Justice pulling out of line there. Very slow start for all of these drivers. It feels like an eternity before we grab the green, but the drivers are now on their way into turn number 1. The green flag is out,
No.
and it's a massive stack up farther behind. You can see drivers flying around the circuit. You can see drivers spinning to try and avoid it. That was a massive crash. I believe Christian Kabanka was at the center of that. Meanwhile, drivers going off farther throughout the field. Yanchi Lin running a P22 now. He was at the epicenter of all of that. I saw bodywork flying all over the place. Clouds of smoke being picked up from cars spinning like a top going down that start-finish straightaway. And it was Kabanka at the center of that. And I think it all started with our pole sitter, Tabino, having an absolutely dreadful start there. Did he miss a gear? Because it looked like he got off just fine. And then it looked like he hit actually, no, it looked like he dropped an anchor there. You can see he goes incredibly slow. Christian Kabanka gets caught out by all of that. And you can just see the rest of the field skate their way in. Thankfully, it was only about 5 or 6 cars involved in that. I say only 5 or 6 cars. It was still a pretty big crash. But the fact that only those cars were involved and there wasn't a massive stack up on a track like VIR is pretty shocking there, Charles.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think he just missed a shift and stacked that line up. And yeah, there was a few cars obviously that were involved, and you kind of hate that for them. But the fact that it wasn't half the field stacking up as cars were spinning across the front stretch as everybody's trying to get up to speed was a great job by a lot of drivers. And somehow Dudu Castro has come out in front of everybody. I think he was starting 6th on the grid. You see Josh Justice all the way up to 10th. And of course, we always kind of follow Josh because he is not only does he run the weekend series and the Ray Esports series, but is also a real life spec racer driver. So this is one of the tracks that he comes out and competes well in, and this obviously gives him a bit of good practice for when he's out driving his car in real life.
Ooh, Ben Jacobs has gone for a spin coming through turn number 1. That's not going to help him. I believe he was running solidly inside the top 15, maybe even in the top 10. But sadly for him, has all gone on. He's now down to P number 36 as he gets a move put on by Burkett going around the outside into NASCAR Ben. But the fact that Dudu Castro navigated all that chaos and jumped up 5 positions from where he started and is now leading this race is unbelievable. Right as I say that, Marco Pinheiro now grabs the lead. They win. Oh, now they're making come to blows coming out of turn number 7, going through the uphill section, and I think that may have been 2 drivers fighting for the same piece of real estate. I think that maybe, well, I'll have to take a look at a replay before I get my final verdict. However, I think Panera might have tried to make sure that Dudu Castro was not a factor in the rest of this race and just ran him out of road. Yeah,
we're going to see Castro and Dudu came in just with a nice crossover coming out of that corner. And I can't tell if, at first blush, it really looks like maybe Castro just kind of maybe ran Pinheiro out of room there. But, these guys have had a rivalry in the series for many, many seasons now. And they don't give each other an inch. And it's always exciting when they're around each other on the track. As we see Pinheiro is in the pits now. Looks like Castro is in the pits also. As he dropped off of the grid. I can't follow. He's down to P12.
I think Castro, after that spin, I think all 4 of his tires are probably rectangles after that, so he is not going to have a very comfortable ride between now and the pit stops. I will give credit to our colleague here at Apex, Josh Wilkie, who's currently locked steady in a nice fight between himself and Yanchi Lin for P16. You can see him side by side coming through the left hook of turn number 4 there, and now Josh may be losing a position here on Holly. He didn't have the best of exits going through the snake section here now, but the fact he's put together a pretty good race running in P17 as things stand at the moment. Again, with how dramatic this race has been so far, and we're only 4 minutes in, anything can happen between now and the checkered flag, but you gotta give credit to our colleague, and we're definitely not just saying that so he doesn't keep our microphones on mute the next time we do a broadcast with him this upcoming Tuesday. He's put together a pretty good race. Objectively, he's put together a good show, currently up 6 positions from where he started. Speaking of, we've seen plenty of drivers cut through the field. You want to run through that, Charles?
Absolutely. Yeah, he's up 6, but Josh Justice is up 15, running in P6. Hugh Simpkins is up 13, running in 11th. So he's having a really good start to the race. Let's see, Nunez is up 9, running in 13th. Maurizio Maselli has started his charge. He's up 20 positions currently, running in 23rd. Jason Perry, Jorgmani, Dorelli, Pellegrini are all up double digits. just kind of trailing behind Naselli, letting him do the hard work, and they're taking the benefit from it and just making their way through the field. After he makes a gap, as we see him going by Phil Berry and getting Berry out wide, and then Rodriguez even further out wider. So good runs by those guys coming from the back of the pack so far.
Surprisingly clean for a lot of the field. It's only been in the top 10 where we've seen drivers make mistakes. We saw that small little schmozzle involving Dudu Castro and Marco Pinero not very long ago, and Pinero's not had a very good race, as has Lou Hawley, who's now going for a spin, coming out of left hook, and oh, this is going to feel like an eternity here. He's stopped on the side of the track, waiting for the rest of the field to blow by. He's going to have to wait for Pinero to be the last car to actually get by him.
A little bit of a gap here.
Oh, this is torturous. Go for it, Lou. Go for it. Go for it. Go for it. There we go. He finally gets out. After about 14 bajillion seconds there stopped. I think he probably could have afforded to go to the restroom while he was stopped. I feel bad for joking about it. I've seen many a drivers here. I don't know if it's something with VIR. Ooh, we have Jim Brewster nearly coming to blows with Simpkins there. He went off coming through. I think that was turn number 10 and turn number 11, I believe that was, going through the tight, twisty, angry tape rooms. Actually, no, I believe that was coming through maybe roller coaster perhaps, but either way, Jim Brewster nearly came to blows with Simpkins, actually lost out on a few spots. Dudu Castro was one of the cars that overtook him there, but already in this race we've seen a lot of drivers come to blows. The red mist is something that I mentioned even before taking into account the shortened track layout. The red mist is something that we see come up in a lot of these races. It's 40 minutes, which may seem like a lot of time, but here these races just fly by with the action we always have week in and week out. I mean, we're already 7 minutes into this race. We've had so many storylines develop. We still have a pit stop to contend with. We still have a lot of stories, including Monty, who's cut through the field, currently running P23 as things stand at the moment. Locked in a nice fight here. Farther in the back is, who's that going off? I believe that may be Burkett that went off the track there.
I think it was Dorelli in the 86 car. Yeah, blue and white. I think that's his livery. So we'll keep an eye out, but it looks like he's dropped down a few positions. He was, I think, running up with Monty and Pellegrini on that run from the back. So yeah, he's dropped a few spots. He's got a little bit of work to make up, but obviously I think he's pretty quick in that car, and so he should be able to get those several of those spots back. Yeah, and that issue with Simpkins and Brewster looked like it was in this section of track right here, coming off of the infield onto roller coaster, and just, you know, three cars really tightly packed, and there's really not three lines through that corner, and somebody lost out. In this case, it just happened to be Jim.
So as things stand at the moment, just passing the 8-minute barrier here on the clock, it's currently Tabino leading the field. You can see a nice battle right behind him. There's Trent Kramer in the midst of it with your S2 leader as things stand at the moment. So we can see he actually goes off the track. The worst commentator's jinx in the world is now Cavarlo there at the front as things stand at the moment. I was just going to mention the fact that Wilson and the the 444 car was putting together a pretty good show, it must be said. Bruzarosco there, I'll try the name again after absolutely butchering it in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors broadcast earlier on this afternoon. He was putting together a pretty good show, still running nicely, P2 as things stand in the S2 category. We'll just have to wait and see if he can hold on to that spot and maybe even challenge Carvalho there to retake the lead. Ooh, Tabino's had an off. He's spun like a top and has actually lost the lead there, and now it's Green leading them as they go through the tight, twisty midfield section. You can see Tabino now fighting for his life with Josh Justice, trying to find a way to get past him as they go through that infield section. We're going to have to take a look at a replay to see what happened to Tabino. I think that was coming through turn number 7.
Yeah, Tabino and Pueblo was behind him, and they both dropped. So I'm wondering if it was maybe just he's just too hot coming into uphill and lost the rear of the car. Of course, pushed Plevel wide, so he had to give up a little bit of ground as well. And then that's put him, just rejoining right in front of Justice. That was a nice job by Josh to just give Tabino a little bit of grace there as we see McCain around coming into Hogpen. It's a really odd spot to have an incident.
And I think I saw some bodywork flying there as well, so there may have been some extracurricular activities that resulted in McCain being stopped on the side of the racetrack. Here's the replay. The driver of the number 121 car ranting his way around Hogpen. It's the slowest spin in the world. Oh, he snaps it back, and we're waiting. Oh, yeah, there we go. Who was that T-boned him? I think... Oh, don't tell me that was our Formula Ford producer, Josh Wilkie. I think that may have been him, because it looked suspiciously like him. I may have to take a look again to see if that was actually him that he made contact with. But either way, not the race that McCain wanted to have, it must be said. Actually, looking back again, I think it may have been...
there's
I'm not
Dorelli.
sure exactly who that was. As we can see now, Dorelli off the track yet again, and Viglini currently running in P31. See these two farther in the back, it must be said, having some, I mean, they're still running at their own track, and I wonder here, with the shortened layout that we have here at VIR, is lap traffic going to play a huge role in deciding who's going to take the checkered flag here?
I think it will. I think it'll play a factor, and I'm just kind of looking at Dorelli's car. It looks like he may have a little bit of wheel damage, and that's just, he's struggling a little bit, because like I said, he's usually pretty quick and can work his way up through the field. So I'm sure he's looking to get, as we see Kramer coming in, deciding that I want to be out of this group for the time being. I think we're right inside the pit window, so I think that's probably a smart move. He can come in and get a stop, take that, get out of the fight that he was in. I think he was around where I think he was battling with Tabino, maybe with Castro. So, yeah, we'll let them go and let them run back up to the front and come in and take a stop and reset himself a little bit and just kind of run his pace and see where he ends up.
Ooh, this is a nice fight between Jim Brewster, who's currently leading in the Masters category, and Simpkins, who's currently running P3 in S2. They were going side by side as it came out of turn number 1, that being Horseshoe, and headed their way towards NASCAR bend of turn number 3. It's Drew Simpkins there holding off in that fight to remain in P11. Jim Brewster, he doesn't have a whole lot of time to lollygag around and wait for Simpkins to make a mistake, because you can see Kurt Nunez right behind Brewster there. They are closing up, so that's a very close fight at the front of the Masters categories. That's a big moment for Simpkins as he goes through turn number 7. Roy, as I mentioned, how he may have to wait for a mistake there. Simpkins puts that mistake, goes off the track there. Still running involved in that fight, it must be said. However, he's going to fall within the crutches of Josh Wilkie, who's going to look for a way to get into the podium positions in S2. That'd be a great result there for the Canadian, the driver of the number 223 car. Jim Brewster right now leading in the Masters category, and I think that may be our, one of the closest fights outside of the front pack, which is still quite nuts there. Currently, Jason Green still leading it as things stand at the moment. Kirk Nunez incredibly close there to Brewster, so I wonder how things are going to shake out in that fight. Nazelli has come into the pit, so his fantastic charge through the field has, I wouldn't say come to an end, because once he rejoins the track, I can imagine he'll be overtaking many, many more cars. But what position was he running in when he came in? I think he was running... Yeah.
I want to say, I think I looked because I saw him come into the pits. I think he was up 27 spots. That's about, he was running, I got 16th or something like that when he came into the pits. He did this last week as well. He just came, he ran as hard as he could and got up to, it took as many positions as he could when he got backed up and was struggling to find a way around cars. He just came into the pits, took his pit stop, went back out in clean air, and he's going to make that extra time work for him toward the second half of the race.
Now, speaking of going through the field, we're looking through the rest of the field now as we're seeing a fight between Simpkins and Wilkie for that final podium position in S2, side by side, coming through the left hook there, using that concrete patch, which, as Charles mentioned at the start of the show, can catch many of these drivers' heads. It didn't catch Wilkie, though, as he gets the move done to move into P number 3 in that S2 category. But right as I was going to mention, before we saw that battle flare up, we've seen plenty of drivers cut through the field like a hot knife through butter already. York Monty running involved in this fight a little bit farther back in P19. He's cut through quite nicely. Started this race in, what was it, 38th, I think it was, and currently running in 19th. So up 19 positions from where he started. One of the drivers that's cut through the field the most, as has Jason Perry, currently running in P16, up 24 positions. Pellegrini's up 28. Then you've got the likes of Josh Justice there, currently running P7. He's up 14 spots from where he started this race. And even the front three, we saw this in the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors Warriors earlier on this afternoon, where the front three were, I think, 19, 15, and 15 positions up from where they started respectively. And oh no, it's the worst commentator's jinx in the world, as that's a huge crash there involving Wilkie, Monty involved in that as well, and I don't know who else was involved in that schmozzle as they went through turn number 1. We're going to take a look at a replay, but man, I think we may have some fresh words from our producer on the Ray Esports side of things when me and Charles have to do our next broadcast, and oh, it was just a quick little spin, and oh man, it's a shame there. You couldn't really blame any of those drivers for T-boning in. Not a whole lot of room to go.
No, not really. Just came in hot into turn 1 and spun the rear. And as you can see, Monty is off the pace with the damage. Really nowhere for him to go. And just, it's one parts of racing, especially when you have a big grid, 48 cars out on track. You're going to end up in that situation a lot of times, and sometimes you can avoid it, sometimes you can't. So my guess is Monty will come in this lap, take his fast repair, get his fuel, and should be able to finish the race no problem. But he's got obviously quite a bit of time to make up. He had a good run going, was up, kind of challenging in that top 15. But now that's kind of all going to the wayside just a bit there.
Now, I'm curious how exactly this changes Jurg Monty's strategy. Was he going to come in a bit on the earlier side, in which case this won't affect him too much, or was he fueled to run very, very late into this and probably pit around the minute 28 barrier? Regardless, I think it is a big, it's a kick in the shins for sure if you're Jurg Monty, and I think he said at the very start of this broadcast, Charles, when it comes to Jurg Monty, he is an incredibly fast driver, not just by Masters standards, but by just overall standards. He is a very quick race car driver here in iRacing. Just if he didn't have bad luck, he'd have no luck at all, and that unfortunately comes true here at VIR once again. But right now we're seeing Josh Justice, the front car of this fight between himself and Carvalho there. Carvalho still leading as things stand at the moment, leading in S2. It's Green leading overall as things stand at the moment in the number 160 car, and that's Brewster still leading in Masters, and I think that's still him and Nunez quite close there. So I wonder if they're actually taking it a little bit easy and not getting involved in a fight, if they're just a little bit maybe getting off the gas pedal a little bit, coasting into the corners, and waiting for the final 10 minutes of the race to really get racy. But those two, I think that's going to be a very hot fight.
Yeah, it is going to be a hot fight. Justice has done a good job, as well as Carvalho. He's up a couple positions as well. Josh having a good run. And yeah, just from watching Monty over these past few seasons, he's one of those guys that just goes out and runs hard, doesn't really do a lot of fuel saving, and runs the tank dry, comes in at the last possible moment to take his fuel. I'm sure that was his thought process, even starting further in the back. He was doing a good job of cutting the way through the field, and just like I said, got caught up in an incident of not of his making, which happens a lot of times, and it's the risk you take when you have a bad qualifying.
I think we're getting to the stage of the race where things are really going to heat up. You see this fight at the front of the field. Jason Green's still leading. I think so far he's led the most amount of laps, and you can see West right behind, only about 0.2 of a second separating those two, only 0.3 of a second separating the front three, but I think there's a little bit of damage on the front of West's car. Thankfully, these Spec Racer Fords are draft monsters, but I wonder if these two tried a little bit of bump drafting, that could be the reason why West has a tad bit of damage on the front end of that Spec Racer Ford.
I mean, it's either that or the start of the race incident is one of those two, that he just maybe picked up a little bit of damage there. But yeah, he's having a good run. He's up in second. So the whatever issues he's had hasn't bothered him too much. And we've got this, and Dantas is doing just such a great job in the what I like to call the NASCAR modified configuration of the Spec Racer, running in fourth in this group with no front end, just keeping his nose tucked behind one of the cars in front, and just trying to stay on the front of that pack. He loses quite a bit of time down the front straight, but is able to, especially when you get these cars fighting through corners like that, just makes it that much easier to stay in the pack.
Dantas is still involved in this fight despite having a Spec Racer Ford with that optional air conditioning package on it there. So again, a little bit more ventilation to him there, but he's still involved in this fight and nearly got a move done there on Pelva, who briefly took second place from West. However, he overshot it massively heading into turn number 1 and nearly went off the track. These these four still covered by about a second as things stand at the moment. We may see, if these drivers start to fight really hard, we could see the likes of Tabino, who's only about 5/10 of a second back of Dantas. We could see him involved in this fight in the not too distant future. This, meanwhile, is Carvalho, who, despite being in second for a while in the S2 category, has taken the lead and has actually started to run away with it. As things stand, he currently has a 2.2 second gap between himself and Brozarosco there in P2 in the S2 category. And we can see an off track there. That's Scott Russell that went off the circuit going through turn number 7. And you can see, and it's kind of cool looking at that. You have the top 8, all of them being S1 drivers, then P9 and P10 being S2, and then P11 and P12 are the Masters drivers. So we've got a nice fight between those two, and Masters still only separated by about 0.3 of a second. So you can see they're still incredibly close. But again, at this stage, I think they may be waiting for the pit stops, which are coming up in the not too distant future. We're over halfway through this race, 20 minutes and 42 seconds on the clock as things stand of the 40-minute long race that we have here. So I wonder if Kurt Nunez is maybe just saving his stuff up a little bit and just pushing Brewster a teeny tiny bit to try and wear out his tires and wait for the end of the race to really try and push him.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's really not in a hurry to make the move. He's just kind of saving his stuff for the end of the race. Nunez is a really good racer and hasn't been up at the top very much lately, but when I first started doing this a year ago, he was one of those guys that was usually up near the front. So he knows how to drive this car. So I'm just kind of curious. I'm watching that front 5 group as we see Brendan Cathcart coming into the pits, along with Kern. That's Dorelli, I believe, as well, and others. But I'm just watching that group of the 5 up front that are just kind of bouncing and are just kind of battling amongst themselves. They don't realize, Dudu Castro's only about 2 seconds behind them. And is plenty quick, and so they need to be very careful. If they start fighting too much and Dudu gets up there, he's going to make it a real race because he's obviously got really good pace in that car. Last season's champion, so he will absolutely put everything he can into getting back up to the front of this group to win the race.
Joao Tabino, who is about a half a second away from catching up to the top 4 fight, has now pulled into the pits. Speaking of that top 4 fight, we've got Pleva trying to go for a move around the outside of Jason Green, heading into turn number 3. Just isn't close enough to get the move done just yet. We may see a switchback here, though. Green runs a little bit wide. Pleva trying to focus on that exit as he came out of turn 3. Just wasn't close enough yet again to get the job done. However, there's a very close fight between the American and the driver from the Czech Republic. I guess it's Czechia now. That is gotta use the up-to-date terminology when talking about the countries that these drivers are from, but regardless, it's still going to be an intense fight between these drivers, and I'm curious now, considering that we saw the driver that was running, it was Tabino, that came in, considering we saw him just come in not very long ago, I wonder, will these drivers try and stretch it a little bit, or are they going to shadow him and actually pull into the pits here in the not too distant future? Tabino did have that damage, so maybe that could be the reason why he came in a bit early. However, these 4 may be seeing the appeals or possible appeals of a undercut strategy, and I think they may come in here in the not too distant future. What do you think, Charles?
I can see that maybe for Dantas. I think probably smart for him to come in as we see him just right behind West, to get his repair done. That way he's got as much pace as he can have for the remainder of the race. But maybe just doesn't want to get back into the traffic and have to worry about that again as we see Pleva going to the lead. Green will run it as long as he can. He's usually really good about his fuel mileage, being able to save. Obviously, him running up front probably hindered that quite a bit. So I think he's more than happy to let Pleva get out and lead the pack for a little bit. And as we see, is I think that's lap traffic in front of them. So this might make things even more interesting. That might change some strategies as we go here.
Oh yeah, you can see the graphic that we have on the right-hand side of your screen. There is pretty much no section of the circuit where lap traffic and traffic period is not a factor. Right now it's between, I think that's currently running in P33 and P32 there. I'll take a look at my live timing screen to see who exactly that is that's running. That's going to be the lap traffic that we see involved here in the not too distant future. That's Kern and Longen there. That's going to be the two drivers that they catch up to in the not too distant future. It's probably a matter of, it's going to be a matter of time, and I wonder, will the fact they're catching up to lap traffic sway some of these drivers into coming in a little bit early here at this track with only one easy overtaking opportunity, so to speak, compared to the normal VIR layout. We may see some drivers just decide to take the high road and come into the pits not wanting to deal with that lap traffic. None of them did. Actually, no, I say that only one of them did, and that is West, who has now come into the pits. So Bobby West, the driver of the number 89 car from the UK, has pulled in one of the first in that top 4 fight to actually come into the pits. So I wonder now, 3 cars involved in that small little peloton of Spec Racer Fords. We may see split strategies from all 3 of these drivers. It will probably make sense for them to come in as a pack. I was expecting Dantas and West to come in as a group, especially with Dantas having that missing front end. He is going to be, it's like dragging a parachute down the straightaway, so he is going to be incredibly slow without the draft help of Bobby West, who's now exited the pits in P16, may drop down to P17. Tabino, I think, is going to be pretty close here and may buzz by him. Yes, he does. Heading into turn number 1, so Tabino actually using that undercut to work him out quite nicely. He was about, at that point, it was probably about 0.8 of a second between himself and West when he came into the pit. So I think we may be seeing the undercuts work well. It all depends on where these drivers come at when it comes to lap traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It's yeah, you know, you've got to you know, if you could find a spot where you can run get some clean air and run some really quick lap times, the undercut works out. If you come back out and you're just kind of packed up in a Spec 2 battle or a Masters battle, it makes it that much more difficult. As we see Pleva looking to the inside, is he going to pit here? Nope, he stays out. He's going to continue his run, but that was a nice place to catch somebody coming out of hog pen. Probably held him up a little bit, but he's just going to get a little bump from green. That's going to give him some speed back as they get ready to make that run down and try and see if they can get ahead of Longen.
I am dumbfounded that Dantas hasn't come into the pits yet. He's now about 2 seconds back of Pleva and Green, who lead this field as things stand at the moment. So Dantas still staying out there on track with that missing front bumper, which, again, as I said before, I'll say it again, this NASCAR modified configuration of the Spec Racer 4, as my colleague Charles pointed out at the start, well, actually earlier on in this broadcast, it is not very good aerodynamically. Granted, you're much cooler as a driver. You have cooler feet, but you're definitely not having cool straight line speed. You are not catching up to anyone, and soon enough I think he'll fall into the crutches of Castro, who's only 3.3 seconds back of Pleva, who leads the field right now. We'll see some of these drivers may have to come in the not too distant future, as we have a lap traffic car. That was Kern there going off the circuit. I think he had a major lockup, may have locked up the rears as he went into turn number 7 and just spun around like a top there. So at this stage, Dantas, I think he absolutely needs to come into the pits, because this is not helping him at all. He doesn't have any lap traffic help. His one main competitor was West, and West is probably close up to him, as has Tabino. I think Tabino is going to be at a real shot of grabbing a podium spot, because I don't think they're dealing with as near of the lap traffic as we're seeing from the front runners. Dantas now finally comes into the pits of the Brazilian in the number 32 car. You can't really see the number 32 since the entire front end of his car is pretty much, well, gone. Has probably been collected by a Marshall and sold on eBay already in this race, as Josh Justice comes in right behind from P7, as does the at one point leader of the Spec 2 category. That's Brozorosco there, who's now finally come in. It's an exodus, well, it's a mass flood of people coming into the pits. Nunez was actually leading in the Masters category, got ahead of Brewster there. I wonder who's going to exit with the lead in that fight.
Yeah, we'll see. It's coming up here. Just who's gonna gamble maybe on fuel, and see if that cut makes it, as we see Justice coming out of the pits now. Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you. I think Dantas kept it left it a little late, but I think the rest of the field should be coming in on this lap. We're at the 29-minute mark, so we're pretty much at the limit of the fuel that they can carry for the race. So we should be seeing those front runners coming in this time by.
Ooh, this is traffic involved in this fight. Actually, no, that's not traffic. That's Dantas, who's exited out in between Tabino and West there. So Dantas actually staying out a little bit and actually helping him out, because he was behind West for the longest time. Now he's ahead of him, and he has that front end of his race car. So this is actually helping out Dantas just a teeny tiny bit. I wonder how they exit out compared to the front two of Pleva and Green, who are still within a second of each other, actually spreading out a little bit. Now Green has come into the pits, and Pleva has stayed out. Dudu Castro has come in right behind, so I wonder how things are going to work out for Dudu Castro in comparison between himself and Joao Tabino, who's currently running a P7. He is going to be rounding the final few corners in the not too distant future. I'm going to keep my eyes to see if we see the number 50 car hove into view while Castro is in the pits. I think they've worked out quite well. Tabino was one of the first to come in. I don't think he's dealt with anywhere near of that bad as the lap traffic that we saw from some of the other drivers, but actually Green and Castro now exiting the pits. They're going to be quite slow here, so I wonder, will Dudu Castro get that advantage? Will he jump position here? I think it's going to be very, very close as they head into turn number 1. Tabino is going to be on the outside. They're going to blow his metaphorical doors off. That was incredibly close.
Oh, no.
As they went 3-1, they made contact heading into turn number 1. Joao Tabino and Bobby West come to blows as they go through turn number 1, and it allows Evandro Dantas to slip by the both of them, and now Dudu Castro is firmly involved in this fight. Just got by Bobby West and may try and challenge. We may see a fight between Dudu Castro and Tabino in the not too distant future. I think Castro is definitely a very fast driver. I mean, he was leading this race for a very brief amount of time at the start, but he was leading this race. He has a one lap lead on the board, so I wonder, will he be able to prevail in this fight? Will he be able to fight for a podium spot here, Charles?
Well, I think they need to be smart about this as we see Pleva coming in for his pit stop. They're about 2.5 seconds behind Jason Green, and if they start fighting now, they'll never catch him. But if they kind of work together for a couple of laps, they should be able to close that gap down, because 4 cars running together is faster than the 1 car running by itself. And it's just a matter of where Pleva comes out, based on where he comes out in regards to the cars that are still on the circuit. And if he comes out, it could throw a wrench into this battle as well. So there's still a few items left to sort out as we see Pleva coming out of the pits now. Looks like he's got a pretty nice gap. See, there comes a car that was back marker, and there's Green. So Green is going to be right on his tail. So that's going to make things a little bit interesting as we see that gap is about 1.5 seconds. So Green's got a little bit of work to do. As we see, that was Tabino going wide there, just locking up, coming through turn 1, which switches that order around. And so, yeah, they've got to be very conscientious about the moves they make, not really cost themselves a lot of time. So they're going to have to make passes down the front straight, or if mistakes get made, they can just kind of clear that car. But if they start battling through corners, there's no way they'll catch that front two.
Now, looking through the pit times for all these drivers, Pleva was in and out of the pits quite quickly. He was only stopped in the box for 10.28 seconds. That was a pretty good stop from him. And looking through, Tabino, at least according to my live timing screen, was only in the box for 9.35 seconds. So I wonder, considering he pitted the earliest out of all of them, will he have to worry about fuel saving here as we see Nazelli move up to P9? His fight through the field continues, now at 34 positions
Crazy.
from where he started this race. That is it's always a good story to follow the driver, the number 44 car, cut his way through the field like a hot knife through butter. But just week in and week out, we see him cut through in races where there's not a whole lot of overtaking opportunities. He still puts on a fantastic show. Speaking of fantastic show, this is Yanxi Lin and Trent Kramer here. They went side by side going through the roller coaster section. Now coming out of Hogpen, it's Lin in front of Kramer. These two drivers we see week in and week out with the Ray Esports Series, and we also see them here here on these Weekend Warriors broadcasts, and they always put on a pretty good show. Will this show continue here heading into turn number 1? Don't have a whole lot of time left to go on the board. Only 6 minutes left in this 40-minute race, so the time has just absolutely flown by here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors, but there's still a lot to be decided. The gap between Pleva and Green is only 0.5 of a second as things stand at the moment. I feel like that gap has definitely decreased. I feel like Pleva had about a 1-second lead when he exited the pits about a lap ago, so we'll see those two battle hard between now and the end of this. If they battle hard enough, will we see the likes of Tabino and Dantes get involved in that fight? Will the front two take each other out, being in locksteady in a very hard fight? And actually touching on Masters, we haven't really talked about them in a low bit. Kurt Nunez has jumped ahead of Jim Brewster in that pit cycle, so Nunez now currently running P15 overall, top of the Masters. Looking through the S2 category as well, Carvalho is on his way to a dominant win. He has about an 11-second gap between himself and Simpkins there, who's P2 in class. And Simpkins, who had that mistake coming through turn number 7 not very long ago and briefly lost P3 to our colleague Joshua Wilkie before he got hit by falling anvil. Simpkins is currently running P14, P2 in the class, and it's looking quite nice for him to hold on to that spot.
Yeah, he's got a nice 13-second gap back to Jurcevic in P19. So the battle really at this point is, as we see Green making the move for the lead, coming down the front stretch, got the good overspeed, and looks like he's going to clear Pleva. Oh no, Pleva's flying back. Oh, that's going to tighten that back up even more. They got to watch out for those cars behind. They got to get that sorted out. So Green is able to capture the spot. He's back in the lead, Pleva in second. But now that gap is about 2 seconds back to Tabino, Dantas, West, and Castro. So that's still probably 3 laps left in the race, so there's still a lot to play for here.
Dear sweet merciful Jesus, look at that hornet's nest of Spec Racer Fords right behind them. Green and Pleva need to sort out this fight, sort out this squabble between the two of them, because in that small old battle, the gap was about 3.3 seconds beforehand. It's now 2.3, so they lost about a second in their side-by-side fight as they went into turn number 1 to start off this lap. Tabino is certainly not out of this. Dantes is not out of this. Bobby West is not out of this, as is Castro. All these drivers are going to be a factor here in this fight. Not a whole lot of time left to go. They're going to hope and really pray to God that Green and Pleva fight really, really hard in the dying stages of this race, which, considering there's only about 0.3 of a second separating those two as they're about to go onto the back straight. Actually, no, the start finish straight away. My apologies. In just a few moments' time, I think the Green and Pleva fight is going to continue to heat up. We'll see how much that gap closes if these two come to blows and battle hard. Coming through turn number 1, you can see just the hornet's nest, 4 Spec Racer Ford cars covered by about a second. You always love to see it. These two are covered by barely any air either, about 0.2 of a second separating themselves as they go into turn number 1. Pleva actually backs to have it a teeny tiny bit there, but I wonder, is he just saving up his time, saving up his opportunities to go for a move? Speaking of opportunity to go for a move, here's Yanji Lin battling with Trent Kramer here for P7 going through turn number 1. Lin gets a move done fairly uncontested. It must be said there from Kramer. I think he is waiting for an end of the race assault to move up back into P number 7. We'll just have to wait and see how that fight transpires between the two of those, but they are quite a long ways back of that fight. The top 6 at this point covered by about 3.5 seconds, which after 37.5 minutes of racing action is wonderful to see here from the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. The field pretty much just as close as it was towards the very start of this race.
Yeah, indeed, and once again, we talk about cars coming from behind. Lynn and Kramer need to watch out. They got Naselli coming up, who's up at 34 positions and is looking to add a couple more spots to that before it's all over with. So they can't be battling too hard through the corners as well. Otherwise, Naselli's going to get both of them. So yeah, it's battle up front starting to heat up. The gap is now down to 1.4 between P2 and P3, Pleva and Tabino. So those cars are slowly working their way in. And now they're looks like they're just right at the edge of draft range and getting a little bit of help from a back marker that was so close. I'm not sure which car that was, but he was in the way, and it was very, very tight through there. But luckily everybody got through, and now guess what? They're all together. So now we've got a nice 6-car battle for the race win here.
a beautiful dysfunctional family here at the front of the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors race here at VIR with not a whole lot of time left to go. We're coming up to the 1 minute. I believe we may be on the white flag here. So as it stands at the moment, Pleva is leading green in P2, and we're seeing some battling farther in the back. Carvalho has had a terrible turn of fortune. He was leading in S2 by a country mile, and now he has about just a second and a half between himself and Simpkins. No, he's running out of gas. I can hear that Spec Racer Ford car sputtering. Pedro Carvalho, who looked to be in command and on his way to a dominant win in the S2 category, is running out of gas, and you can see Simpkins there slowly railing him in. The driver who at one point we thought was pretty much all but done for in that fight after a spin coming through this corner, coming up in a few moments time with turn number 7, now retakes the lead of the race, and the dying breaths with Carvalho's car sputtering, running out of gas. That is heartbreak there, an absolute just a turn of joy for Juice Simpkins there in the 377 car. He is on his way to a good win. You can see some drama farther behind. That's Trent Kramer. He was involved in that fight between himself, Nazelli, and Yanshi Lin, and they came to blows as they went through. That was turn number 14 of Roller Coaster there, and Trent Kramer is the one that loses out in that fight. But meanwhile, up in the front, Pleva took the checkered flag over Green and Tabino. It was incredibly close there, and I think we may have to take a look at a replay of a lot of the stuff that was going on that final lap of the race. I'm trying to think of his name now. Trent Kramer. I'm at lost for words after how dramatic that was. And we still haven't seen Kurt Nunez take the checkered flag, or Juice Simpkins, the two drivers in the S2 and the Masters category. They're just finally taking the checkered flag, just barely crossing the line now. You can see it's close between Nunez, Burkett, and Brewster there. It was a photo finish between those two, barely in the air, separating them for P2 in the Masters category. Burkett holds off in that fight. But we saw Kramer get involved in a schmozzle between himself, Nazelli, and Lynn. Then we saw Carvalho running out of gas. Oh, he's actually going to take the checkered flag. Ooh, loses that, I think, on one more spot. Actually, no, it was borderline between himself and Andrew Love there. Carvalho holds on to P23. Commiserations to the Brazilian who's putting together. He put together a fantastic drive, and just the numbers here in these fuel economy races. That's what cost him.
Yeah, just go back and look at it as his pit stop time. He just took a lap less than everybody else did, and it just didn't work out for him. It was about 2 seconds between, as far as his pit stop was 2 seconds shorter than Simpkins, and pretty much 2 seconds shorter than everybody, and that was the difference in the race for him.
We're just seeing some of the last cars finally take the checkered flag. I think if we could, similarly, could we take a look at a replay of the very close call between Pleva and Green as they went down the start-finish straightaway at the very start of that last lap? I'm not sure who that lap car was in the midst of that, but I saw Pleva and Green. They went side by side, and that lap car involved those two nearly crashed, coming to take the white flag, running in P1 and P2. That would have ended in absolute tears if those two had come to blows in the dying stages of the race. All credit to Tabino, who after a very up and down race ends up taking the checkered flag in P3, only about a half a second back of Pleva. I think if this race was about 10 minutes longer, that would have been a ridiculous fight at the front of this field. I mean, again, at the checkered flag, after 40 minutes of racing action, the front three were separated by only about a half a second. So if that race just had even one more lap, that would have been absolutely nuts. And I think this is the replay of what happened going down the start-finish straightaway, I believe.
Yep, and Green just moves to the outside. I think is this the final lap? No, I don't see a car in front of him. So, yep. Yeah, I think that was, no, I'm not sure where this was. Sorry. That was the move of the race to put Green in the lead, but then Pleva was able to get back by and take the race win. So, congrats, Alice. Great race. So here we go. It's a 27 car on the outside. Carl Burke, lap down car. And yeah, made things, tightened things up even further and made that a lot more interesting at the end as we see him coming up there down the front straight. Yeah, Green just turns in and it was there, and I think a little bit of contact, but no harm, no foul. And yeah, I think you're right. One more lap and that order may have been switched around because it was going to be much tighter on that next lap. But great job by Pleva to get the win, as well as Green and Tabino to get the podium.
And I think we'll pull up the results here from the Spec Racer Ford race, which I think was a little bit of a sleeper. I really wasn't expecting it to be as dramatic and awesome to watch as it was here at this track combination, which I don't think I've ever driven. But it was Alice Peleva. Let me restart there. I absolutely killed that pronunciation. Alice Pleva there taking the checkered flag, the driver from the Czech Republic, taking it only 0.3 of a second, separating himself and Jason Green at the end there. That was an absolutely awesome fight between those two in the dying breaths of this race. And Joao Tabino just a little bit too far away to put on a challenge there at the end. However, great drive from the Brazilian after a very up and down race. He finishes this race in third. That's Evandro Dantas in fifth. Bobby West in, actually no, it's Evandro Dantas there in fourth. Bobby West is in fifth. Then Duda Castro putting on a pretty good recovery drive there after being involved in a spin in the early stages at Sem outside the top 10. He ends up finishing this race in P number 6. That's Yanji Lin there in 7th. Nazelli there in P number 8, and I'll pull up the final tally here. Up 35 positions from where he started this race. Absolutely awesome from the German driver. That's Jason Perry in 9th. Josh Justice thankfully ends this race with the checkered flag instead of on his lid. He finishes this race in 10th. That's Christian Kabanka in P11. Simpkins, the top of the drivers in the S2 category. Kurt Nunez, the top of the drivers in the Masters. That's Burkett and Jim Brewster rounding out your top 15.
Yeah, so Cathcart in 16th. That was a great battle between that Masters group there. Brendan Cathcart in 17th. Jersevich in 18th. Scott Russell 19th. Jeff Jacobson rounds out the top 20. P21, Tom Gradwell. Pedro Carvalho in 22nd. Andrew Love in 23rd. 24th is Alberto Pellegrini. Trenton Kramer 25th after some final laps dramatics. Paul Jackson in 26th. Russell Telker in 27th. Jesus Rodriguez in 28th, Gianni Longan in 29th, Jorg Monty in 30th, Philip Berry in 31st, Wayne Buttermore in 32nd, Wilson Bruzarosco in 33rd, Michelle Viglini in 34th, Carl Burke in 35th, Marco Pinero, obviously with the issues with Castro at the start of the race, finishes 36th, Sergio Dorelli 37th, Bob Kern 38th. Ian Wilson in 39th, Josh Wilkie in 40th, Alan McCain 41st, Lou Holly in 42nd, Adam Bradshaw 43rd, Ben Jacobs 44th, Claudio Gardini several laps down in 45th, Manning Grinnan, Chris Montgomery, and Jason Grider round out your 48 car field.
And I'm curious what the hell happened to Bruzarosco there, who was involved in that S2 fight throughout a vast majority of that race, ends up dropping outside the top 30. That was a disappointing turn of fortune there for the driver, who at one point led in S2 to finish outside the top 30. And we got a driver waiting in the interview waiting area who's jumping from room to room. Charles, would you like to have a chat with Jim Brewster, who again is hopping from room to room?
Yeah,
he's excited to talk. You want to have a chat
Yeah,
with him?
I always like talking with Jim, so we'll get Jim in here. Jim, so P3 in Masters today. Congratulations. Had a good day for you. P1 and a P3 in both races.
What do you think of the finish line?
Yeah, and very close there at the end. I was just going to talk about, that was a really good battle between you and Kurt and Marcus Burkett and Brad Cathcart pretty much during the entire race.
Well, it was me and Kurt all race. The other two guys
okay.
caught us after the pit and at the end. I guess Kurt and I matched on the pit, but then he was out a little bit after the pit, and I couldn't catch him. Yeah, I was beating him through the infield. I could leave the infield 0.5 up, and then through the back section, he get down to P3, 0.3, and I think he was cruising. And he beat me out of the pits just a little tiny bit, but about the same time. But anyway, fun race. I was, I knew we gridded up that a lot of the Masters aliens weren't here, so I knew it was me and Kurt and a couple other guys were going to have to fight for it, and I started ahead of him, and I was watching as he caught up, and it was a good fight. We were really matching each other. We were running some really good laps and hitting a lot of apexes, and it's a challenging track. I mean, you feel proud just to nail laps at that track, every lap.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. Obviously this is basically half of VIR. It's the north half. So that section looked like, at least in practice, that little bit of a concrete transition there coming out of the uphill just seemed like it caught a few drivers out. They were struggling a little bit. Did you find any issues?
The camber's insane. Yeah, the camber is insane. I mean, you go into the bridge, you shift up to fifth, you downshift twice, you let off, and the hill catches you, and you can find the apex, you hope, and then right as you crest, it just falls off camber to your left. And so if you miss, you're really, you're out to lunch. So you have to make sure you get the apex on the uphill, and then the entry to roller coaster is always totally blind. It's really tricky. You do one downshift and you sort of hang on a little bit, then do a second downshift. Either configuration, the entry in a roller coaster is tough.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, Jim, congratulations. We're going to bring Kurt in here and talk to him. And
you bet.
We haven't
Hey,
talked
thank
to
you
him for
much.
a while. All right,
It's a fun Sunday.
Sir.
See ya.
Yeah. All right.
And as Charles said, I dragged myself I dragged myself out of the commentary booth. We'll drag Kurt Nunez in here and have a quick little chat with him before we wrap things up. Kurt Nunez, you're the second half of that fight that we saw throughout this race with Jim Brewster in the Masters category. So talk us through the race we had here at VIR.
It was pretty cool. It was a lot of fun. That start was chaos, and somehow I got through it. And then I just hung behind Jim and saved my tires. And that's the only way I got into the first.
Now, we saw this track being very tight and twisty, I'll tell you, when I saw the track map when I first loaded into the session here not very long ago. I looked at this track layout and I described it as a sad-looking chicken nugget. There's so many tight, twisty, and technical sections here at this track, and you mentioned tire management. Was that the main thing that helped you take the checkered flag, the top of the Masters?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I actually dialed down my setup before this race for that reason, because I knew tires were going to play a factor. And like I said, I just hung behind Jim. Thank you, Jim. And then who was it? Marcus behind me almost got me at the very end.
That was a beautiful photo finish between y'all in that Masters category. And actually, funnily enough, here at this north layout of VIR, there's the same amount of corners here as there are on the full layout. And actually touching on this layout, I believe it's one of the first times we've used it here for the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. So what do you think of running here at VIR on the north layout?
I like it better than the other, only because there's not so many opportunities for draft passes. So it makes it strategy play into it.
I'll tell you what, I love seeing some strategy racing. We saw that here at VIR, and I think we may see some of that a bit more next time out at Canadian Tire. So what do you think is going to be that race in 1 week's time?
Oh, that'll be a fun one. I'm looking forward to it. Those chicanes kill me, though. I'm horrible at that track.
Well, we saw a very interesting race there from the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors earlier on this afternoon, so hopefully we see less alien abductions than we saw there. Kurt Nunez, thank you for joining us here in the commentary booth. Hope to see you next time out at Canadian Tire.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the interview, and thank you for broadcasting for us.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I'll tell you what, both Charles and I and our producer Samuli enjoy the racing, and I know our producer Josh on the Formula Ford enjoys it as well as he joins y'all out on track. So Kurt, thank you for the very kind words. Again, hope to see you next time out at Canadian Tire.
See ya.
And that was Kurt Nunez, one of the drivers involved in that awesome fight in the Masters category, and Charles had a very interesting, so to speak, evening of racing action here from the Weekend Warriors series. Alien abductions with the Formula Fords, a very strange combination and track layout with the Spec Racer Fords. Just, again, we asked the drivers what their thoughts are entering Canadian Tire in 1 week's time here for the SRFs. What do you think that's going to be like?
Oh, it's just going to be fun, and it's the same thing. Obviously, no rain, so that's one less checkbox we have to worry about because the spec racers aren't enabled for rain yet. But it's still CTMP. It's still a very difficult track. It's a very technical track. Obviously, there'll be lots and lots of bump drafting and passes down the back straight as they gear up for the next lap. So it's going to be fun. I'm actually kind of liking these different layouts. It brings an additional challenge to the drivers when they come in, and the drivers that maybe get out and run some officials during the week get a little bit of an advantage because they kind of already are used to the track layout. So it's it's cool. It's another added aspect to this, and this is what makes one of the things that makes the Weekend Warrior so much fun to broadcast.
Well, I think this was a pretty cool combination to run at. Maybe we'll see it in next season's schedule here for the Spec Racer Weekend Warriors series. Again, I mentioned that earlier. The next time you'll see this series is in 1 week's time at Canadian Tire Motorsports Park. That is going to be part 2 of our Weekend Warriors coverage here on Apex Racing TV. Every single Super Sunday here. It's always great to be a part of the series. And speaking of a series by Ray Esports, you can check out the Ray Esports Racing League on Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday. That's going to be an absolute barn burner at the Daytona Road Course. That is going to be action-packed from start to finish. You better stay tuned for that, because that is also going to be a fantastic race there in the Spec Miatas and the Spec Racer Fords. But as for this broadcast here for the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors, I think that will just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Charles Bichelle joining me in the commentary booth, and Samuli Kumo doing a fantastic job working on the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you all again next time for Super Sunday.